Hello, welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 132 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 58 of A Clash of Kings, that's Davos 3. We were so excited to get a new POV character, and then we had to wait 32 chapters for his second visit, and now another 16 chapters for his third visit.
He's lagging way behind. He's back there with Theon.
Yeah.
I guess these new POV characters need to earn their time in the sun.
He's still trying them out. They might not make it to the next book.
Right, yeah. I feel like I jumped in on your My Name's Simon. I feel like you barely got the N of Simon out before I was like, and I'm Mackelly.
Oh, I didn't notice that. In fact, now that I've been doing more editing, I actually feel like you leave too long of a gap between that. So I'm glad you do.
Okay.
I'm glad you did.
Jumped right in there. Anyway, so we're going to chat about the chapter. We're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide you some additional information about the characters, other things of note in this chapter. Well, how are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing all right. Been running around this evening. Just got down here in time to record. Ethan flies out tomorrow morning for a job interview in Atlanta, and he's never flown solo before, so a lot of he's going on this job interview. He's got all his clothes and stuff, and I was like, so do you have like, hard copies of your resume in case you need to hand them to someone? He's like, no. Well, you got to have stuff to like take notes with, like a notepad and paper. No. Okay, well, you got a folder to put stuff in? No. So we were running around getting him checked in. He didn't know that he had to check in online on his for his flight and all that jazz. So a lot of running around. But his flight leaves at 6 a.m. tomorrow.
Ooh, that's brutal.
It is.
I've flown out at 6 a.m. and it's brutal.
Yeah, so I've been toying with the idea of, we don't live that far from the airport, so I've been toying with the idea of getting up before the sun and driving him.
Oh, that's a long time before the sun.
It sure is. It's basically middle of the night.
Yeah, you'll be back in bed before the sun comes up.
The ticket says that boarding starts at 5:20 a.m. So when I saw that, I was like, he'll be 22 soon. He can drive himself. He'll figure it out.
Is he flying back tomorrow? Is it one day?
Yeah. Flies. Gets
good.
in at like 7:30 a.m. and flies back out in the afternoon or evening or so.
Remember Carson did that flight a few years ago, and she took my car to the airport for some reason. And in Atlanta, she lost my car keys. And when she got in at 2 a.m., she called me and I had to drive to the airport and go get her.
Oh. That's love right there. How are you doing? How are you?
I'm all right. I've been playing a bit of chess recently, and I played against a guy the other night. I play on Lichess, so any listeners play on lichess.org. Look out for me. My name is Shepherd Rook. I'm not very good.
You've had requests from at least one listener to play chess.
Caspers wants to play, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I haven't played him. I should, but I crushed this guy, and he said there's a chat window, and he said, so you have what's called an ELO rating, which goes up if you win. And it goes up by more if you beat someone with a higher ELO rating. Goes down if you lose. Goes down by more if you lose to someone with a lower ELO rating.
Yeah,
you get the idea.
I get it.
And my ELO rating is, I don't want to have it recorded for posterity because it's embarrassingly low. But the guy said, your ELO rating belies how good you are at chess. You're easily 1600. And I said, and yet,
here I am.
Because I am so bipolar. I either play great or I play terrible. I mean, just terrible chess. The guy challenged me to another game, and he promptly crushed me. I'm like, see,
really?
This is what happens. I am just not very good at.
So
I'm just not consistent enough.
Your rating went up and then right back down.
Yes, and by winning and then losing, that causes more damage than losing then winning.
Really?
Well, think about it, because if you lose first, you've lowered your rating.
Uh-huh.
So when you win, it was more of a surprise, so your rating goes up by more.
Oh,
if you win first,
right.
you're now way ahead of this guy, and then when he beats you, it really damages you. So.
Oh, that's rough. Well, I bet you can beat him in Pandemic. I've seen you beat the Pandemic game in like 10 minutes or less.
Thank you. That was kind of you. I do like Pandemic. It's not competitive. You all play as a team, so I wouldn't actually beat him. He would win if I was on his team. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yes.
Yes, we've got Pandemic Legacy night tomorrow. Me and some chaps that I play Pandemic Legacy with. Very exciting.
I know you get excited for that. That's
almost
the highlight of your. You do it once a month, right?
Yeah, yes, but we haven't done it this year, and we're into March, and we haven't played this year, so we're overdue.
It's
and
almost
only one
the
of us
highlight of your month. If it wasn't for this shining hour
for
here.
This, exactly. Yeah. The only one of us can ever remember the rules from game to game, so it's a good job he turns up, because otherwise
you'd just be floundering around. Oh boy.
Let's get down to business. Last we saw of Davos, he was midwifing Melisandre's second child under the walls of Storm's End.
I didn't read that till just now.
Prior to that, he'd been trying to give solid counsel to his king, but Stannis was in no mood to leave Storm's End empty-handed. Since then, in the ensuing 16 chapters, we've learned that Courtney Penrose threw himself from the walls of Storm's End, with a little bit of help from Melisandre's child. And Edric Storm, Robert Baratheon's bastard son, has been delivered to his uncle for safekeeping.
Right.
Try to imagine air quotes, everyone. Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
Why don't we? Let's see how it goes. Davos sails into Blackwater Bay on the Black Betha. The water's choppy, the tide is with them. When close to King's Landing, they withdraw canvas and move to oars, less flammable. He's positioned on the right flank of the formation, which will be the closest to the city, and so should see heavy fighting. He sees the flagship Fury ahead and to the center of the channel. Stannis' ship, but commanded by his brother-in-law, Imry Florent. Stannis is with his army.
The plan is for 10 rows of 20 ships. The first 2 rows are fighters charged with destroying Joffrey's fleet, the boys' toys, as Florent dubs them. The next rows will be troop carriers who will land on the city side of the river, drop their troops to attack the walls, then return to help with the naval battle. The last few rows will land on the opposite side and ferry Stannis and co. across the river. Salladhor Saan and his Lysene fleet will stay in the bay, protecting their rear in case the Lannisters have any ships waiting to spring a surprise.
The wind is against them, as will be the flow of the river, so despite the tide, the initial advantage will be with Joffrey's fleet. By holding in the river, Stannis' forces are limited to lines of 20, which lessen their advantage. Davos reckons that they should stay out of the river and land on the other side of the Red Keep, the northern side. Any battle on the open water of the bay would vastly favor their larger force.
Some captured fishermen have tipped them off that there might be a chain being built, but intel was vague as to whether it was ready. As the Black Betha closes on the mouth of the river, Davos' old smuggling days come in handy, and as he recognises a couple of new features, small towers on either side of the river. On the city side, it's on the stony ground below the walls of the Red Keep. On the far bank, it's built out into the water, presumably to make it a pain to attack by foot. These are clearly the chain towers, but he's not sure if they're primed.
As he passes between the towers, Davos sees the glint of metal below the surface. The chain is in position, but it's not raised against them. No time to raise any alarms, nor anything that can be done. He's further disquieted by the sight of Joffrey's fleet backing up in the river, drawing Stannis' fleet onward further into the river. He notes the familiar shapes of the royal fleet. However, several notable ships of the fleet are missing. He's puzzled by that.
Pitch begins to fly from the city, causing fires on multiple ships. The Black Betha moves on towards the fighting. He sees Stannis' new standard everywhere. He thinks that it's a mistake too. The traditional Baratheon crowned stag will be welcomed by the people. This Lord of Light thing, less so. At least Melisande was sent back to Dragonstone with Edric Storm. The lords had prevailed on Stannis to send her away, so that the victory would be attributed to him, and him alone, not to her sorcery.
The ships begin to offload their footmen, but the Hound and his mounted forces sweep along the riverbank and drive them back into the river. Davos notes that the wooden docks have been burned, and the stone ones have been blocked by sunken ships. There will be no easy landing here. Now the first row engages with the opposing fleet, ramming, grappling hooks, boarding parties, the whole shebang.
The giant trebuchets inside the city walls rain down huge rocks on them. Black Betha rams the lady's shame and sinks her. Davos spots green flame, wildfire. Expected, but with the alchemist's skills much diminished, Sir Imry believes that it will run out before it can do much damage. Davos sees a flotilla of small, ragged boats coming downriver, far too small to do anything, a whiff of desperation perhaps.
Black Betha engages with the White Hart. Grappling lines are thrown, and Davos leads his men across. He fights well, but takes an axe to the helm that rings his bell. Davos surveys and sees more success for his side. He also notes that the ferries are being loaded up on the south bank with horses and men. The Swordfish, which is part of Team Stannis, has a poor captain and his ship is on fire, and still has raised canvases. He spots a Lannister target dead ahead and calls for ramming speed. Davos sees green ooze between the boards of the rotting Lannister vessel and cries out for the Swordfish to stop. It doesn't.
There is a short, sharp woof, and Davos is in the water. When he rights himself, he sees a 50-foot-high green demon with a dozen hands, in each a whip. Wherever the whip touched, fire followed. Another wildfire carrier blows up, and more of the fleet are engulfed. The river's currents draw Davos out to the bay, which he's okay with. He's a strong swimmer and he can head for shore or the Lysene vessels. But now he sees that the chain has been raised. Already a dozen vessels had snagged on the chain. More followed. A dam was forming of orange and green fire, and Davos is drawn inexorably towards it.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
That was a long summary, but like we were talking about before we started recording, this chapter is primarily just description. There's no real conversations or not much in the way of dialogue.
Yeah. So let's just remind you first of the layout of King's Landing. Think of King's Landing as a square, but on its point, or a diamond, as some might say. The eastern corner is where the Red Keep is. It's the one that juts out furthest into the water. So it marks the end of the Blackwater Rush River. So it basically, if you go due east, they call the river's banks the north and south bank of the river, but actually from that point, the chain actually runs due east, I would think. Would you agree?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And so that marks the end of the Blackwater Rush. So the Blackwater Rush is the river, so it comes up, and it is flowing sort of roughly northeastwards, I think, at that point is reasonable to say, because it's coming up the side of the city, yeah?
Right, yeah.
And that side is where all the docks and harbours were before they were befouled or destroyed to prevent Stannis from landing. On the other side of the keep is the bay, which is open ocean, and that's where Joffrey's fleet didn't want to fight because they would be significantly outmanned.
Right.
So that's the sort of basic layout of this.
Yep, good job with that.
I will say, actually, so this has not gone well. Ultimately, this doesn't go well for Stannis' fleet. In fact, I think Stannis' fleet has been pretty much decimated by this, it seems.
They're in big trouble.
Feels like, yeah, the only ships that are going to be unscathed are the Lysene ones, which are out in the bay. Pretty much everything else is either destroyed or in serious danger of getting destroyed.
Yes.
And I would say that this is a pretty bad tactical maneuver, strategic plan by Imry Florent. He's going to be remembered as a bit of a failure, I think. But I'll just say in passing that I've been reading some military histories recently, and I will say there's a very fine line, and often that fine line is simply a matter of luck between those who are remembered as military geniuses and those as complete failures.
I could see that.
If Imry Florent, I mean, basically, what would make Imry Florent not do this plan? It would be sort of like the hunches and worries of his lieutenants, right?
Yeah, there was a few cues, like when the Lannister fleet started to backpedal, when they started to come back into the river, that might cause you to pause at the mouth of the river and think, why are they going inward? What are they trying to draw me to?
Right, and also the chain. I mean, Davos wasn't the only one to hear about the chain.
Right.
And he shouldn't have been the only one looking out for the chain. Yeah. But then what do you do with the chain? What do you do with the chain? It's there underwater. You can see it. If your plan was to send all the boats down the river anyway, then the chain being across the river and not blocking your path doesn't seem to make any difference. If it comes up when you're halfway across, then, okay, some of your boats are stuck in the bay.
Right.
It is tricky, but it just feels like Imry Florent is both a little bit naive with his leadership here, but also a little bit unlucky.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. You're right. He's going to get a bad rap for this because he had overwhelming numbers in his favor, and he got just completely destroyed here. But I think Tyrion put together a really smart plan as well that probably would have gotten a lot of captains tripped up. Now, Davos does mention that he notices the two new towers that mark each side of the chain because he is a native King's Landerer.
That's true. Yes, that's true. The only reason he's looking in the water for the chain at that point is because he saw the two towers.
Yes. So he said that those towers would be lost on Sir Imry Florent because he's not native to this area. He wouldn't know that those are not supposed to be there. So he might have heard about the chain, didn't see any chain, didn't notice that those towers are not.
Yeah, true. Good
new.
Point. But I will say, I mean, so if Imry had listened to everything Davos said, he might have been more cautious. But as a military leader, you can't always be cautious. You know, you've got to be bold to make these things happen. So I'm willing to cut him a little bit of slack. The fact that there was this much wildfire, the fact that the chain was ready and in place.
And used non-traditionally. Like, traditionally, you would think they would use it to keep the boats out of the river, not trap them in the river.
Right.
So
right, very much so.
But I guess we'll get to what went wrong, what we think are the main issues that went wrong will be here shortly. But a real quick thing about Sir Imry Florent, who is now he is the Lord Commander of this fleet. I forget, the Lord Admiral, I think they called him, of this fleet. He's commanding from the Fury, which was Stannis's ship up to this point. Now, it's unknown if he has any previous naval command experience. I could not find anything that said that he did. So it seems possible that he was simply chosen out of nepotism. But Brightwater Keep, which is the seat of House Florent, it's kind of near the coast. It sits between the Mander, it sits south of the Mander and north of the headwaters of the Honeywine River. So, you know, maybe there's some naval experience thrown in there somewhere.
But it would be river rather than sea.
Right. It's kind of near the west coast. It's in the Reach, so it's kind of near the west coast of
kind of near the west coast. Right. It's not like there's a freeway.
Right. They're certainly not the red wines. You know, they're not known Navy people. So
yeah, but you think, I mean, he must have had some either some experience of his own, or he's talking to people who know how to arrange a naval force. I think it was foolish to do it the way they did, you know, to put all their eggs in one basket.
Yes.
The thing is, put all your eggs in one basket if you can lure Joffrey's fleet into a fair fight. But if you can't, then spread your forces. Send some into the river, some to the north of the city. I think that would probably be... Well, hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah, and Davos says as much. Davos said, if I had to do it, If I was the admiral, I probably would not send all my ships into the river. And then he thinks that he looks at him like, what is it? Who's this lowborn craven, one who bought knighthood with an onion? And we hear his inner thoughts that are very similar to this. This was not said out loud. This is what Davos perceived Sir Imry's look to convey. So I just wonder how many slights like this that Davos feels he's getting are real versus how many are the imagination of a man who's been raised above his station and feels inadequate about his ability to be taken seriously by others at that same level.
I'm going to side with Davos here. I got to imagine that if he's hanging around with lords and he smells of onions, that they're always going to look haughty at him,
Yeah, very possibly. Back in Davos 1, he calls Allard, who is his son, a smuggler's son, and Allard reminds him that, no, I'm a knight's son. If you won't remember that, why should anybody else?
Right.
So there could be some self-esteem issues going on here as well.
And of course, I mean, he really is low-born, and what earned him, he has Stannis' ear and has earned Stannis' trust.
Right.
He hasn't earned anyone else's trust. They just know he's low-born and got his knighthood by smuggling. It's not exactly the most noble way to achieve it.
Right. Yeah. But Davos gives Sir Imry some credit. He says there is reason for Sir Imry's haste. And he mentions that the winds have not been kindly to them on this trip. They lost 2 ships to the rocks of Shipbreaker's Bay, just trying to get out of Storm's End. And then, as they were coming into the gullet, which is the kind of narrowing part of Westeros.
The entrance to the bay, basically.
Yes, the entrance to the bay, exactly. A storm rose and scattered them, as he puts it, halfway across the narrow sea, which is funny because it's nearly exactly what Dantos had prayed for when he was talking to Sansa in the last conversation they had in the Godswood. He said, perhaps the good gods will send a storm to sweep them from the sea.
Huh.
So maybe the 7 were listening to our drunken...
Or he was praying to Relor, perhaps.
Maybe. I was thinking about that, though, when I was thinking about the fact that he had prayed for this thing. It's a little bit odd. Is it, I guess, is the question, a little bit odd that he's rooting for Joffrey?
Well, I think he's rooting for not being killed.
Yes, that's true.
that's what he's rooting for. I think Sansa is afraid of Stannis winning, but she obviously wants Stannis to win. But there's reason to be fearful of his success.
Of course, like we talked about last chapter. The devil you know versus the devil you don't know. Yes. Except for in this case, it's actually the devil.
Yes. So Davos reckons that Stannis would have reached the Rush days ago, the weather delays having cost the ships this time. Dantos had told Sansa that Stannis was still on the march, but the vanguard had arrived at the river led by Gaiard Morrigan. So in the intervening time, we think Stannis has bolstered the armies on the shore of the Blackwater Rush.
Right.
Which means that they've got a lot of people there. I mean, it's going to take these ferries a lot of time. I wonder if actually the chain could be used to sort of make a makeshift bridge where they could get everybody across.
They could just try and run across the chain.
Exactly.
Now, of course,
once the fires calm down, just run across the boats that have been hauled up on the chain.
Yeah, that's true. They'll all be stuck right along that chain.
They all get halfway across and then they lower the chain.
Of course,
this is going terribly.
Davos doesn't know about the troubles that Stannis and his men were having with the mountain clans in the Kingswood. So Stannis probably got there a little later than Davos realizes, but still likely before the ships just arrived here. And I was thinking, we talked about this in the past, but so Stannis shows up there on the south bank of the Blackwater Rush, and Davos figures he's got the men making arrows and rafts. And I was like, not thinking about sending men upriver to do some recon, possibly looking for a place to ford and create
build a bridge. I mean,
right.
You've got enough time here.
You got like 15,000 men, and who knows how much time. Maybe work on a bridge upriver somewhere versus some arrows.
You do like a human pyramid in that time.
I was also thinking that Tyrion must have finished the chain before Stannis' men got there, or they might have seen exactly what they were planning.
Maybe they'd finished the end of the chain that was on Stannis' side of the river, and then they just brought these big links like sort of down into the water and clapped the next one on there. But that would have given the game away, I feel.
Possibly. But even if Stannis' men knew what the chain was up to, like knew that there was a chain there, they really couldn't have warned the ships anyway.
I've got a little bit of pedantry about that, so I'll hold off on future comment.
All right.
So the fundamental issue with the battle plan was sending all the ships down the Blackwater Rush.
Yes.
Like we said, there are two landing sites. The main harbour, which is on the west or north bank of the Blackwater Rush.
Uh-huh.
Tyrion's made that very inaccessible by burning the wooden jetties, fouling the stone ones. But you could land on the other side of the Red Keep, directly from the bay. And I would think that a little bit of recon... You see, this is one thing I would have done if I was Imry Florent. I would have sent a boat on ahead to talk to Stannis and come back to the fleet.
Sure.
With a little bit of intel. Because Stannis could probably see the harbour had been burnt and ships sunk where the stone jetties were.
Yeah.
And said, look, you're not going to be able to land ships where you want to land, so we'll split the ships. Some there, some on the other side. Where it's a beach on the other side, so I mean it's not perfect for landing big ships either, but it can be done.
Right. You know who would be perfect for that job of sending a ship to recon to convene with Stannis would be maybe a
Davos
former smuggler. Slip in the night to meet with Stannis and slip back out again. Yeah. Yes, I completely agree. The fundamental issue is an overcommitment into the river. I don't know that they needed to sink, almost literally sink. I don't know that they needed to put 200 ships, I guess I should say, into that river where whatever fate befalls one in such close quarters is going to befall all of them.
I'm not the kind of salty dog who's going to haul you up for calling a ship a boat. Just FYI.
Okay. But Davos agrees. He says we are well, he doesn't say it out loud, but he thinks we are fools for meeting them on the Blackwater. I mean, he said exactly what I just did. We're jammed in too close between the banks of the river here. Yeah,
absolutely. The Lannister ships are back into, they're in the mouth of the river and they're backing water to draw the Baratheon ships deeper into the river. So they're letting the Lannisters dictate where the battle takes place. That's always something you don't want to do.
And you have to figure those trebuchets were set to fire in a particular area of the river. They're so huge, you can't imagine that they could turn all that easily.
Big changes, yeah. And that's the kind of thing where intel from the ground troops could have come in handy to say, we've noticed they've been practice firing 3 giant trebuchets into the river. We've not seen anything on the harbour side. Right. Maybe that's the safer place to land,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Sorry, I said harbour side, but I meant the bay side.
Bay side, right. I knew what you meant. Yeah, so that's what I mean by if Sir Imry Florent hadn't been what seems to be seriously overconfident about their ability to crush this much smaller fleet, he might have picked up on some things like, why are these ships backing up when we're coming toward them? Should I make an adjustment here? And what are those huge trebuchets that I see sticking over the tower walls? Right. Maybe I should make some adjustments for that as well.
Yeah. I also think that the other part of this is the goal of this battle, because obviously there are several goals here, one of which is to destroy the Lannister fleet so that you have control of the water. But the other one is to get Stannis' forces across the river so that they can besiege the city. which of those is more important? I mean,
I would say the troop movement would be more important in the long term.
Right, because you're so much larger than Joffrey's force. I think they said at least 4-1 at one point. They said,
yes,
and it was missing its two biggest ships. Apparently, the two that Davos noticed were missing aren't there. We know why. They're on the round the world trip to Dawn.
Right. There's actually, I think there was three of the big ships were missing.
But I thought Davos only noticed two. I thought it was only two that he actually named that were missing.
Oh, maybe.
There were 3 in the fleet that took Myrcella, but only 2 of them got noticed by Davos by their absence. So I would say that if you'd had that emphasis from the get-go, the most important thing here is to secure the troop lines across that river. You would have done a very different thing with this. You know, for instance, you might have just set up a blockade across the river mouth to keep the Lannisters at home. And then just worked across the bay.
Yeah, well, because the southern bank of the Blackwater Rush extends further east than the northern bank does. So if you set up a blockade at the mouth of the river...
Yeah, there are 2 handy towers showing you where to do
right
it.
right about where these 2 towers are. And then you just have all the troops shift down as far east as possible, and then you run them up to the north bank... The north bank on the bay side of the city, and
if anything, actually, the naval victory, the primary reason for the naval victory, is to make the ferry crossing of the troops safer.
Right.
That's why you would do it, but there are other ways to do it without going hell for leather into the jaws of death, which is what they did.
Yes, I think probably that might have been a bit of an ego trip for Sir Imry. He wanted his big naval victory, maybe.
Yeah. So Salladhor Saan's ship, the Valyrian, and his fleet are back in the bay as a reserve, which does make sense, especially with Davos noticing that not all Lannister ships were accounted for, that they could be lurking somewhere to come at them from behind.
Right.
But really, it's a slap in the face. Sir Imry trusted him no more than Stannis did. Salladhor, that is. Not
right, yeah. Davos mentions that the reason he thinks that Salladhor is not very well trusted is too many complaints and too much talk of gold that he was owed. And just a quick refresher on Salladhor Saan, he's the Lysene pirate friend of Davos that Davos sat with in the pub in the first Davos chapter when they were on Dragonstone. And Salladhor did complain that Stannis only paid him with promises, and he specifically wanted Davos to remind Stannis that he'll owe him another 30,000 more dragons come the Black of the Moon. So, yeah, he does seem a bit disgruntled. Maybe not someone you want leading the show, but...
On the flip side, if I'm owed 30,000 dragons, I'm going to remind the person who owes me 30,000 dragons.
Yes, you might.
I'm not saying I'm stopping working, I'm just telling you. So, as we've said, the chain feels just a little bit odd. Maybe it feels like the chain was just superfluous to the plan here. The wildfire worked its magic as it was. Nobody was going to avoid the flames by quickly turning back and heading out of the river. It just wouldn't be quick enough.
Right.
So maybe a poor use of resources,
Yeah.
Could it have been better, I mean, they were making armor for the people who are going to be fighting on the ground, which is still going to happen, presumably. This war is not over.
Yeah, it was made such a, I don't know about, say, a big deal, but, there was several paragraphs in multiple chapters dedicated to the creation of this chain. But you're right. I mean, probably without it, it would not have been much less of a crushing defeat.
Right.
The wildfire saw to that.
It feels like the chain is going to kill Davos. That's pretty much all it's going to do, because it's catching all of the burning wreckage in his path.
This was all a revenge plot against Davos. Yeah, but like we were saying, Davos is a King's Landing native, been a smuggler for 40 years. This is his home turf. On the subject of poor use of resources. Right, yes. He knew the waterfront, as he says, better than the back of his hand. He spotted those 2 towers immediately. So, not that I'm saying I wouldn't I wouldn't imagine that he was going to get command of the fleet because one, he admits he's never been in this type of battle before. Yeah. In fact, when he rams Lady Shame, it was the first time he'd ever rammed another boat. Yeah. So, but I have a hunch maybe not a lot of these guys have had a lot of naval fighting experience.
Right. The only real chance in the last 18 years has been the assault on Pike, presumably.
Right. Yes.
And presumably some of them are veterans of that, but
yes,
probably not that many.
And that naval battle was led by Stannis, who is sitting on the land over there.
Right. So I will say the whole thing. I've been reading Malcolm Gladwell books recently, and one of his books is called David and Goliath, and this battle is a very typical David versus Goliath miscalculation. So Stannis' side has the distinct advantage in terms of numbers, the number of military leaders at their disposal, their naval power, and so on. It's not a slam dunk in this case. It's not like truly Goliath versus David, because for all their disadvantage, Team Lannister does have those city walls, and that's a big help,
Yes.
But they've won something here without those city walls. Those city walls didn't really come into this. This was all by ingenuity. Imry Florent embodies the typical "we have the upper hand already" military thinking, which closes off the creativity. Uh-huh. The underdog, Tyrion, never stopped wheeling and dealing and trying to think of ways to get out of the mess they were heading towards.
Right.
And by doing that, he built advantages for the smaller force,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. We've talked several times about going the other way onto the beaches on the north side of the keep. If those aren't booby-trapped too, for the same reason, Like, hey, if this doesn't work, let's make sure they can't land there either,
Solid point, yeah. Yeah, Davos thinks, at first he once they're halfway through the mouth of the river and the chain's still not up, he thinks, wait, are they going to split our force in half? What will be the point of that? The ones that are still back in the bay will just go to the safer northern side of the city. Yep. But you're right. It very well may be booby-trapped there as well.
Yeah. So all of these things could have been foreseen, but Florent and company were too confident to spend time on these worst-case scenarios.
Right.
Whereas the underdogs spend all their time thinking about these worst-case scenarios and what they could possibly do to get out of it.
Yep.
They actually, he was quoted, Florent was quoted as saying, with 4 times as many ships, we have no need for caution or deceptive tactics. Well, then you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. Then.
Yeah, exactly. It's just such an overcommitment. There is just no need to cram all 200 ships into the river at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I noticed was, well, actually, I was going to mention this in Pedantry, but I'll mention it now because it's kind of germane. So the ships are 10 across, okay? But and they're in 20 rows of 10 across, or I mix that up. It's 10. It's
10 of 20.
20 across. There's 10 rows of 20 across, okay?
Yes.
The first 2 rows are just fighting ships. They're there to fight and clear the Joffrey's force. The next 6 rows are troop carriers to drop people on the city side, and then the last few rows are empty, going to take Stannis' forces across. That's stupid. That doesn't make any sense, because now you've got ships on Stannis' side that are already full of troops, and you've got ships on the city side that are completely empty. It made no sense. It should have been split down the middle. The ones on the port side should have been empty. The ones on the starboard side should have been full.
Yes, that's a very solid point. Unless Davos misspoke, and that's what he meant, that makes... You're right. There would be... The 20th ship on the port side would still be a troop carrier.
Right. Unless they're planning to put planks and they just run across all 19 ships. Seems
unlikely, but I guess.
Yeah. George Martin has a lot of fun with naming the ships. I would think that of this chapter, at least 10% of it is him just giving a roll call of ship names.
Yes,
and
a lot
it really
of that.
reminded me of... There's a comedy sketch from a show called The Day Today in England, where he's listing off horse names, and they're just funny horse names. There's one called Immaculate Pasta, one called Novelty Bubble. The last one is called Alf Ramsey's Porn Dungeon. Alf Ramsey was the England soccer manager when we won the World Cup in 1966. So it's like Tom Landry's Porn Dungeon.
Oh yeah, good stuff. Yeah, we'll actually get to some of the names that maybe some of the background of some of these names of the ships in our background section here in a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, so the two ships that Davos noticed the absence of were Robert's Hammer and Lady Lyanna. And so he was worried about them attacking them from behind, but we know they're off gallivanting with Myrcella.
Right, but the thing about that is the lack of those ships, especially the lack of Robert's Hammer, possibly might have helped distract from the actual trap, because their absence was conspicuous, which would cause people, well, maybe Sir Imry wouldn't notice, but people who would know, well, that giant 400-oar ship really should be out there, might cause you to overlook the real trap when you're trying to think, oh, they're going to surprise us with those ships that are missing.
But then again, that would also make me think the last few rows should turn back here because something's amiss. Those ships might be behind us, so let's slow down. But I think the other thing to think about is this: there's going to be a lot of friendly fire deaths here. The wildfire is pretty indiscriminate.
Yes.
So that might be one of the reasons they sent those ships away, to protect them, because they knew that it was going to be like everybody's burning here.
Yes, that wildfire is indiscriminate in its destruction. Yeah. It is taking out. I think Tyrion knew going in that he was sacrificing his own navy in order to save the city from Stannis' navy, because it's chaos and they were just blowing things up left and right.
So just a reminder about the wildfire. Helene, who was the pyromancer, said to Tyrion that the yields were going up and attributed it to the possible rebirth of dragons. We did wonder a few chapters ago what he was going to do with the commandeered merchant ships. So I think some of them got scuttled to foul the ports, but then some of them were used to carry the wildfire in amongst the things. But I will say, actually, just in passing, I imagined these were just sort of pushed out into the channel, but it sounded like they were actually sailed or rowed out into the channel. So that is pretty much a suicide mission.
It really is.
See all this green gloop? Row that out into the middle of the channel and then swim back.
Yeah, they got some folks from the dungeons. Hey, we'll let you free if you paddle this out there.
Swim back. Can you take the chains off before I swim back?
Just get it out into the current and let it go. Jump back into the water. But so Davos he's looking around and he sees all of the fiery heart sigils of the Lord of Light, and he thinks that we should be flying the crowned stag sigil because that was King Robert's sigil, and the city would rejoice to see it. I also found it noteworthy in this description here that he refers to the crowned stag and Stannis'
small.
What's that?
As being small.
Well, he says it's imprisoned inside.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The heart, the flaming heart. I noted the use of the word imprisoned in the flaming heart. But he's right. I mean, we've mentioned in the past, fly whatever flag you want after you take the city.
Yeah.
But do the smart thing here and fly the one that gives you the best chance of winning right now, which would certainly not be flying this new god's flaming heart sigil.
Yeah, but I mean, the counter-argument, it's not very convincing, but the counter-argument is, if you win the city flying that flag, then it maybe gives you some authority to impose that religion. If you don't fly that flag on the way in, then it might be harder for people to accept the religion.
Yeah, I guess so. But so I was envisioning. Okay, so you get across, you get your people across, and you've now sieged King's Landing, and you're flying the crown stag sigil. It's only a matter of time before the small folk revolt and throw open a gate or two if they're really tired of what's going on inside the city.
Yeah.
And of course, then that would end the siege. And then Stannis would be right there to lead into the city. And he could better control the men as far as rape and pillage goes. And if the small folk threw open the gates, that might create more of a bond between them and the Baratheon soldiers. And then, again, there would be less worry of rape and pillage.
But do you think the sigil makes much of a difference, really? I mean, because
Joffrey's
flying the Baratheon sigil alongside the Lion of Lannister,
right.
So that sigil will be on both sides of the battle. I think that the general disgruntlement with their treatment and privations would throw open those gates.
Yes, you're right. I guess it might just cause them to hesitate if they're unsure about what this new sigil means.
Yeah. We burn lots of children sacrifices. You're like, well, hang on. Now I'm thinking about it. Joffrey doesn't seem so bad.
Joffrey's not so bad after all. Mm-hmm. But again, Melisandre's been sent packing back to Dragonstone. So, if you're ever going to abandon that sigil, now would be the time to do it, because she's not even here to see it.
Has she gone? So yeah, we talked about her last week that it might be a ploy to use the Shadow Demon to get rid of Joffrey, but his advisors leaned on him to do it off his own merit. Not having her there at all, though. I mean, if you storm the gates and you kick the gates down, no one's going to think it was a sorceress.
Right. Yes.
If you use a Shadow Demon, sure, people are going to think it's a sorceress. But if you just win by fighting, no one's going to think it's the sorceress. So having her there handy, just in case something goes wrong. As
a backup plan. Right. Not a bad backup plan there. Okay, now we need your Shadow Demon. Go do what it does. But so Davos said, well, he was thinking about when that discussion was happening, when Stannis' lords were encouraging him to do this without Melisandre, which of course is a convenient story point, because it makes this battle necessary. With her being there, there's always that, well, if this doesn't work, we'll do it the other way. So
yes,
it's kind of important.
You could go back to Dragonstone and get her.
Yes.
I've changed my mind. You were right.
So Davos is thinking back about that discussion, and he thought he was happy to see the back of her. I wondered if he could do it over again. Would he prefer her intervention versus what what actually happened is possibly the death of his sons and himself here?
At least 2 of his sons were with him. Was there a third?
There were 4 of his sons were with him.
4 of his sons were here. Wow.
Yes. So, would he do it again? If he could do it again, would he be like, I'll take Melisandre?
Yeah.
Doing that versus...
I think that's pretty easy. Losing 4 sons versus trying it again a different way. You try it again a different way.
Yeah, so, it's not the way it worked out, unfortunately, but...
Well, fingers crossed for Davos' family. So, do you have some background for us? Do you have some ships you could name?
I do have a few ships that I could name.
The Immaculate Pasta?
Yes, let's start with that one. We'll start with the ship that we spent this whole chapter on, which is Black Betha, which is Davos' ship. And she seems to be named for Queen Betha Blackwood, who is the wife of Aegon V, or Egg as we know him from the Duncan Egg series, who also happens to be the sister-in-law to our Maester Aemon. She was known as Black Betha because of her dark eyes and hair. And she was considered to be a spirited woman, but also a bit stubborn and willful. And she was the daughter of Lord Blackwood of Raventree Hall, and she married then Prince Aegon Targaryen in 220 AC when she was 19 years old. Well, while Betha and Aegon had married for love, Betha worked to arrange politically advantageous betrothals for her children. But as kids will do, they resisted their parents' plans and instead married for love, as their parents had done.
Oh, so sweet.
So that is Black Betha's namesake, likely. It doesn't say specifically, but I'd have to imagine that's who she was named.
Yes, that's her for sure.
Now, next, so I'm not sure if we mentioned this or not, but Davos was about the 6th ship in from the starboard side.
Yeah.
And on his starboard side, I believe, was a ship named Lady Maria, who was captained by his second son, Allard. And that ship is named after Allard's mother and Davos's wife, Maria Seaworth.
Okay.
So also in the second line here, Davos and his sons are in the second line back from Fury, which is the primary ship of the fleet. Yeah. The very furthest starboard ships in the second line are Piety, Prayer, and Devotion. And Davos thinks they're going to need every bit of that faith in order for them to survive the damage that's coming their way. And
right, because they're nearest to the city, right?
Yes.
So they're getting hit by
hit by everything. They were the ones that landed, and that the Hound and his men boarded and were slaughtering people. But there, it's mentioned that they were seized from the unfortunate Lord Sunglass. Now, who is this Lord Sunglass? Well, Lord Gunser Sunglass was a pious lord of Sweetport Sound, and after the Queen's men destroyed the Sept at Dragonstone, he went to Stannis and told him he could no longer support him due to him abandoning the Seven, and Stannis had him thrown in the dungeon. And of course, his faith in the Seven explains the names of these ships here.
Yeah.
Then we have the Fury, which we've already mentioned, I think, was Stannis's ship. It's the one he used to command the assault on Dragonstone 16 years ago when Viserys and Daenerys escaped. It is also likely that he defeated the Iron Fleet in the Greyjoy Rebellion using Fury here as well.
Yes, why not?
Then we get a couple of the ships were named basically after their house sigils. Like we've got Swordfish, which I don't think was specifically mentioned that it was, but the Swordfish is the sigil of House Bar-Aemon, which is a Stannis bannerman. So seems likely she belonged to their fleet. And she was ironically slow considering her name. Because I looked it up. Swordfish can reach speeds of over 60 miles per hour, which is 97 kilometers per hour, making it one of the fastest fish on Earth.
Look at you doing the conversion for the listeners.
Well, when I looked it up, it already had it in there for me. So I'm assuming that's correct. It's funny because the whole time he keeps looking over at this Swordfish, who is also in their second line here, and it's lagging behind constantly because it has this gigantic ram out front that's in the shape of a swordfish, and it's too heavy.
Yeah. But the swordfish is the one who actually triggers the fire because it's on fire when it rams the wildfire boat. Yeah,
right.
Ship.
And up everything goes there. And then finally, another one that's named after its house sigil is Redclaw, which is owned by Adrian Celtigar, Lord of Crab Isle. And the Celtigar sigil is a bunch of red crabs.
So, comparison with the television show, the battle for King's Landing was given an entire episode of the television show. The naval battle was a major part, but far from all. They didn't bother with the chain, which honestly seems fairly superfluous when you have the big boy of wildfire. That'll take care of things anyway. The wildfire blast was well captured and certainly killed Devon, son of Davos. You actually see him killed. The show gave this a bit more specificity by having the wildfire delivered in one big ship and Bronn firing a flaming arrow into it to blow the whole thing up. But I actually think the book is more convincing in having the little boats of wildfire. I think that's a better distribution of wildfire. It makes more sense.
Yeah. Good stuff.
So, pedantry. So, I've been holding off on this one, but why haven't Stannis' ground forces, who've been waiting here for ages, I mean chapters and chapters they've been sitting around, destroyed that chain tower? Why haven't they destroyed that chain tower? It's sitting there on their side of the river.
Right.
And it's defended. That's the thing. If it was undefended, you might not notice it. You might be just like, oh, wonder what that is, and not think of it. But it's actually, there are people in there who shoot arrows at you when you come close to it. Therefore, it's a military target. Therefore, attack it.
And Stannis was the master of ships in King's Landing just about a year ago when he left, and those towers would not have been there.
Good point. Good point.
He should know that those are new. But now I get it. It would be tough to destroy because it's out in the water and they'd have to figure out how to get out to it. But they've had enough time. Maybe they could come up with some sort of ramming mechanism.
Or anything. I mean, just have swimming contests out to the thing, you know? I mean, I wonder if it's doorless. I wonder if they're bricked in, these defenders.
I think it mentions, Davos mentions seeing a door.
Okay, so they are. I thought maybe that was on the other side, but yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, he mentioned seeing a door. I don't know if they both have doors. Yeah, that's a good point.
It just seems strange to me because I mean that clearly was something you could have affected in the time you were there, and it might have helped. And sure enough, in this case, it would have helped. You know,
they were busy fletching arrows. They had jobs to do.
Yeah. And then the other one I had was about that I've already mentioned it. Have the starboard boats be the troop carriers and the port boats be the empty ferries.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if that's what Davos meant to say, but it's not how it came across.
Not how it came across. News and notes.
I had a thing here about Elden Ring, but I forgot to put the information in, as you can see.
I see that. But I actually know what it is, right? Elden Ring is a video game that's...
yes.
Landed landed like a boat full of wildfire.
It released last week, and it is the long-awaited game that George Martin played a large part in the writing of the story of. And just this evening, I asked Ethan if he owned it. He said yes. I asked him if he's enjoyed it. He said no. I've been too busy with schoolwork. So good answer, Ethan Robert.
Yes, 2 for 2 on that.
Yes. But he did say it's likely to win Game of the Year, that his friends have been enjoying it. So
there you go. And we have a review from Sweetie Hedge, Apple Podcasts.
I thought you should read this because it's from Apple Podcasts Great Britain. So.
I see. Okay. Great show, great patter, great books. Really enjoying this show. Simon and Mackelly are such good hosts. Dry wit, funny stories about themselves. Anus. The anus story comes back to bite me once more. Make you feel like you're having a natter with pals. Ridiculous levels of in-depth knowledge about the books and the wider world of Westeros. My inner geek is delighted. Not so inner, to be honest. Thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate all the time you've put in. So thank you very much, Sweetie Hedge. We appreciate it.
Thank you so very much.
Okay. In conclusion, so round 1, very much to Tyrion. It sounds like almost all of, the naval force is going to be destroyed here. Quite a few dropped their payload of ground troops on the King's Landing side of the river, it seemed, although some were forced back into the river. They might be rather vulnerable to trouble from above now, or from sorties by the Hound and Balon Swan, because they're not going to get much more support.
Right.
As the first row of troops, you're in danger, but as more troops come behind you, you're in less and less danger. You know, but when those troops dry up because they're all dead,
or there's no way to get them across the river
because all your boats are burning. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I mean, Davos stops kind of paying attention when he starts drowning, so that's understandable. So we don't know exactly how the ship numbers are going to turn out, but it doesn't look good. That's for sure.
For sure.
But like we were saying, you know, you can understand Sir Imry's desire to rush being late to the game. You don't want to anger your king any longer if he's sitting there wondering what in the world happened to Sir Imry and my fleet.
Yeah, but his battle strategy, coupled with allowing the Lannisters to time to plan and to dictate where this fight would happen, has just played into their hands throughout and left him high and dry.
Yes. Which, you know, you could probably blame on some level of hubris there.
Yeah, for sure.
That he thought there's no way we can lose this, so we'll just let them lead us wherever they want to lead us, and we'll crush them wherever.
But I still think that this goes all the way to the top, because I think Stannis should have said from the get-go, hey, I'm going to go with the army. The reason you're going to bring that fleet in there, and job one is to get us across, you know.
Right. Clear instructions.
Yeah.
That's what you need. Clear instructions.
Yeah. So Davos seems to have lost his sons. It doesn't look like many people are going to survive, and he himself might be about to get cooked, so it might be 3 and out for Davos.
Yeah, maybe. So, about his sons, Mathos was on board the Black Betha with him.
Yes.
And the ship basically was pretty much exploded when Swordfish rammed into the wildfire boat. Yeah. So that doesn't bode well for Mathos. Now, Davos survived. It's possible Mathos could have also survived.
Right.
However, back in the first Davos chapter, we learned that his other son, Merrick, is an oar master on the Fury. And the last Davos saw of the Fury, she was engulfed by wildfire. So that really doesn't bode well for him. No. And then his oldest son, Dale, and his second oldest son, Allard, as I mentioned, are both ship captains of the Wraith and Lady Maria, respectively. No word on their state. But with the river blocked by the boom and the wildfire burning everywhere, it doesn't bode very well for them either.
So he doesn't... It's all TV show that he has a son who's Stannis' page...
He does, Devon. Devon is Stannis' squire, so hopefully he's still okay on land on the south bank with Stannis. And then he actually has 2 younger sons, Stefan and Stannis, I think their names are. They're still at home, so they should be safe, I guess.
The battle isn't over yet, but they may live to regret not having Melisande with them. But then again, why did she not see this coming in the flames? Maybe the flames just showed lots of flames, and she was like, I don't know.
It's just like, I don't know. I'm only seeing fire today. It's not working. The flames are a bit green, but that's all I got. But you're right. It's definitely not over. Like I said, Davos was our point of view, and he had new problems that he had to overcome. So we don't know exactly what the situation looks like, but it's in dire straits. But, I was also thinking about another disadvantage of Stannis driving his infantry to the south bank and then just stalling out here. Because if Littlefinger is successful in rousing the Tyrell cause and they ever do engage, Stannis' men have nowhere to retreat. Their backs are to the water here. So that could be problematic if that were to happen. Of course, we've heard nothing from Littlefinger or the Tyrells, but he's put him in and he knows that Loras left quite upset. Stannis has plenty of men that were in his camp and now are in Stannis' camp, so they have to know. Yeah. He has to know that.
Yeah, he has to know that if he sees Loras Tyrell riding over the horizon, it is not to help Stannis Baratheon.
No, it's not.
Right.
Anyway, that's all I got.
Okay. Well, there's 3 ways that you could help us out. You can first go out and leave us a review. There's no better advertising, as Sweetie Hedge did. Secondly, you can buy some merchandise from us at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com. Or you can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal. Big thanks to those who've already become sustainers. We greatly appreciate it.
We do. We had several new sustainers this week alone. So thank you to all of you, and thank you to all our sustainers, regardless of when you've signed up. As always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at ghostharrenhal. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Discord.
Discord's where it's happening.
It really is.
I like the people on Discord. They're so nice. Well, thank you for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.